everyone. If we haven't met yet, my name's Leah Zickmund. I'm the Executive Director here at Hourglass, and I'm so pleased to welcome you all to this evening's event, Our Schools, Our Future, Navigating Artificial Intelligence Together. If you're new to Hourglass, we focus on researching quality of life issues in Lancaster County and raising nonpartisan solutions through experts who can speak to our biggest challenges. A focus area for Hourglass has and will continue to be public education and our public schools, and also the leadership that guides them through all of the changes that we see in the world. As we know, a major change to education currently is the complexity that we face with incorporating artificial intelligence in administration and in classrooms. A component of Hourglass that I feel most proud of is our history of convening leaders to embrace difficult conversations at times when it is easier to just stay put in our own worlds. This sort of collaboration is what powers Lancaster County and brings forth innovative solutions for the people who call it home. Today, I'm so proud to highlight the leadership in education through our keynote and our panel discussion. Before I formally introduce our keynote speaker today, I'd like to thank our generous sponsors for this evening's forum: Fulton Private Bank, Willow Valley Communities, CoreWeave, Carissa Technology Parks, Connective, and Monty and Molly Milner. Thank you for your support. Let's give them a round of applause. I am now proud to introduce our keynote speaker for the evening, who told me that even if I have a brief intro to make it shorter, so I'll do my best. Dr. Carrie Rowe, Pennsylvania's Secretary of Education. Secretary Rowe has over 25 years of experience in public education and is herself a product of Pennsylvania's public schools. She has overseen initiatives like structured literacy, workforce readiness, teacher recruitment and retention, and student mental health. Most recently, Secretary Rowe announced $7 million in grants to 10 Pennsylvania institutions of higher education, and by most recently, I mean yesterday. These grants will be used to build dual credit programs to help more students access college courses and get credits for free before graduating high school. Many of you are familiar with the name Pedro Rivera, president of Thaddeus Stevens College of Technology, who in response to this shared, dual enrollment is one way to innovate and provide students with the opportunity they deserve for education and a thriving career. It is this sort of innovative leadership that Pennsylvania needs, and in a time where new technologies exist, understanding the path of students' education and career readiness is more important now than ever before. Without further ado, let's give a warm welcome to Secretary Carrie Rowe.
That was the perfect length, thank you, I appreciate that. That AI, or not, we're doing AI, the dual credit innovation grant that she talked about is something else. Today at the state board meeting, we talked a little bit more about it, and I was at a university last week, and that university is having seniors, they're navigating all the complexities of their senior year, but they're having seniors go to Kutztown University and get 12 to 18 credits during their senior year. Mind blown, right? First, when I was in high school, it wasn't a thing. I mean, maybe one or two kids did it. I don't know, maybe in the gifted program or something like that. It just really wasn't a thing. And then we start to hear about kids doing it, maybe one course, and maybe it's in the high school, that the teachers have become adjunct. And then it gets a little more sophisticated if a school system can actually send them to the university campus, which I think is really spectacular because maybe a kid for the first time can see themselves, actually envision themselves going to college where they hadn't seen it before. But 12 to 18 credits in their senior year is wild to me. So I hope it's something that we can see more of as we just continue to envision how changes in Pennsylvania can be made. So before I actually start talking about AI, I want to tell you one thing about me as a student, and that is when I was growing up, I would buy my lunch at school one day per month, and it was on Lucky Plate Day. If you don't know what Lucky Plate Day is, it is the day when the cafeteria workers would put a sticker under exactly one tray. And if you got the tray that had the sticker on it, you got to pick out of the prize box. And the prize box were simple things like pencils and pens and cap erasers, and I never won. Not in my entire schooling career did I ever win. But now as the Secretary of Education, I am taking it back. And I'm saying, while I don't have a prize box with me, I do have a newfound hobby of 3D printing. This is a pigeon, a carrier pigeon, and when you gently take its head off, pull that up, there is a note inside. So I am encouraging the winner of this to pass notes for sure. From the Secretary of Education to you, pass notes. So there is a note inside from me to you, and you, in order to be the winner, have to have the other side of this very sophisticated sticky note. It would be on the back of your chair. Hey! Come on down. Let's reunite our sticky note, right? See, me either. But now I get to give. I can't push that back on there because there's a note inside. There you go. All right. Pass notes. So thanks for letting me be a little bit playful there and get in touch with my inner middle schooler. So let's picture a middle schooler, a middle school student sitting at a kitchen table at night. I think mine's ringing too. That's weird. A middle school student sitting at a kitchen table at about 10:30 at night, and of course that's when they've chosen to do their homework, because of course they're middle schoolers. They open up their laptop, and they're not setting out to do a Google search like some of us might have. They're not going to text a friend, but instead they're going to ask an AI tool a simple question. They're going to say, can you help me write my essay? And a couple of questions and answers later, and the AI will spit out a full introduction, 3 paragraphs for the body, and a conclusion. And it's going to be polished, and it's going to be confident, and it's going to be convincing. And so now, depending on who you are when you hear that, you either are thinking that this represents the very future of learning, or it's the beginning of an educational crisis. It depends on where you sit. But whether you are somebody who feels optimistic right now, or you're somebody who feels a little uneasy about this, or some anxiety, I think one thing we could agree on, and that is that artificial intelligence is no longer just approaching our schools. It's already in our classrooms, it's already in our homes, and it is already in the students' hands. So the question before us isn't, should education actually respond to AI? The question now is, how do we lead through AI without losing what makes education actually human? What makes education part of our humanity? So for some educators, again, AI represents this extraordinary opportunity. It can personalize learning. And if you haven't experienced this, it's really something, where you're learning something and you answer a couple of questions, and then if you get it right, it increases in complexity or it moves on to the next question. If you get it wrong, the AI can determine what it is that you've misunderstood or what it perceives you've misunderstood based on thousands of other inputs, and then it can remediate that so that you actually learn. It can give faster feedback. And we know that in classrooms, we've got a ratio of 1 to 20, if we're lucky, 1 to 25, might be more natural, 1 to 30 in some places. So faster feedback makes a lot of sense. Translation support. There are a couple of schools that I visited in York County in particular that have more than a dozen languages spoken. If they can get translation help, and I'm a former foreign language teacher. So I was kind of at the forefront. When I was teaching, there were some really clunky versions of translators, and we always knew when kids were using those translators because it made no sense what they came up with. But now that's not the case. Not only can they get the written translation, but they have a pretty authentic accent if you ask the AI to speak it. It's not really so much a computerized voice. So of course we would want that, not only for in the classroom, but also to communicate with parents. It would make sense for some of us. Accessibility tools, if you or a child of yours has a disability. Instead of leaving the classroom in order to receive modifications or adaptations, it could be done right there in the class. And there's something to be said for that ability to stay and have that sense of belonging. And then, of course, there's the idea of lessening the administrative burden on teachers. And just about every time that we can reduce the administrative burden on teachers, I'm all for it. So that's one half of the room. I don't even know if it's 50-50, but that's some of the people. And then on the other end of the spectrum, we have those who are throwing up red flags. And they're not wrong either. They're asking questions like, what happens to academic integrity? What about privacy? What about authentic student thinking? And perhaps most importantly, what happens to the deep human relationships that are at the center of teaching and learning? And from my perspective as the Secretary of Education, again, AI isn't a future issue, AI is a now issue, and because it's here right now, it's our responsibility not to decide whether schools will encounter it, but it's our responsibility to decide how we're going to lead through it. And I'll remind you that every major technological shift that we've experienced in education has created some anxiety, including calculators. I see some nods, right? The meme is the teacher saying, you're not gonna have a calculator in your pocket all the time. Well, little did they know, right? But they're still not wrong, because what was behind that message was you still should know the fundamentals. So they're not wrong. But it did raise anxiety. The internet raised anxiety. Search engines raised anxiety. Smartphones and iPads in school. Oh my. And every time, educators rose to that challenge and they asked themselves the question, how do we use this tool without losing what matters most? And they have found a way every time. This time, however, I'll admit things feel a little bit different, because now AI doesn't simply retrieve information, it generates it, it predicts it, it imitates, it adapts, and it responds in a conversational way. So for students, it can feel decidedly human, and for me, that raises the stakes. Because the challenge before us then isn't just a technological one, it's mental health, it's education, it's ethical, and it's increasingly a civic issue. The students who are sitting in our classrooms now are entering a world where AI is going to shape every sector of society. The IMF estimates that nearly 60% of jobs in advanced economies, they say, may be affected by AI. Okay, that tells us a little something, right? I think they will be affected by AI, and to what degree, they're not exactly saying, but 60% of jobs are going to have some touch point with AI. And workforce research also tells us, and has been telling us for a while, that the skills that are required for a lot of careers are going to shift dramatically by 2030, and I think we've already begun to see that. So if we ignore AI in schools, then I think we're not protecting students from the future, we're withholding their preparation for their future. Okay, but there's more. But preparation doesn't mean an uncritical adoption. At the Department of Education, we don't believe that innovation should move faster than wisdom. And in fact, whenever this topic comes up, I often am reminding people that education doesn't move at the speed of technology. Education moves at the speed of trust. We could probably say the same thing for business. The AI is there right now to revolutionize business, but most businesses aren't adopting AI wholesale. They're still keeping the people doing the work in large part because the trust isn't there quite yet. So while trust has to be part of the equation, at the same time, we can't let fear be a barrier to thoughtful progress. So at the department, we're trying to approach this the same way that any good educator approaches teaching. That's with curiosity, with evidence, with collaboration, and with humanity. So this is why Pennsylvania's emerging approach to AI is grounded in a simple truth, which is AI should enhance human capability, not replace human connection. And that's the truth for schools especially. It should enhance the teacher's capability, not replace that human connection. The best schools that I see aren't ones that are built on efficiency alone. If I were only looking for efficiency, I would probably make some changes. But the best schools are built for relationships. Chatbot can't notice when a student who's usually gregarious goes quiet. And an algorithm can't fully understand grief or uncertainty or identity or belonging, all things that students struggle with as they grow up. And no machine can replace the educator who sees potential in a student before they see it in themselves. So technology or AI can support learning, but it's the humans who inspire it. I could probably pause here and have you think back to a teacher that inspired you. It's the humans that inspire. It's the technology or the AI that can support. And if we lose sight of that distinction, we risk building systems that become technologically sophisticated, but educationally hollow. So what encourages me is the educators that I see across Pennsylvania approaching this moment really thoughtfully. They're not asking, how do I stop AI? I don't hear that anymore. They're asking questions like, how do we teach students to use it responsibly? How do we preserve authentic thinking? They're asking me questions about equity and privacy. And I think those questions are right for this moment. Educators and students are actually seeking guidance in this space. There's some national surveys that show that 80% of educators say that their districts still don't have solid AI policies. And students, and that they would prefer that they did, I should say. And students are also asking for help too. A national survey says that 70% say that guidance on responsible AI use would be valued. That's a strong statement for K-12 students, right? That they would value that. It seems clear to me from what I'm reading and those that I'm talking to that people aren't expecting education systems or even state government right now to have every answer immediately, but what they are seeking is leadership. So leadership from a state education agency like PDE begins, in my estimation, with humility If we say that we know what should be done with AI in schools across Pennsylvania right now, that lacks some authenticity. We understand what some of the guardrails should be, what some of the supports should be, but we have to be okay with what I generally refer to as living in the gray, right? There's no exact right answer. There's very few exact wrong answers. It's all something in between, and it's somewhat like fashion, right? What we say right now or what we wear right now will be laughable in 5 or more years, right? Just look back on some of your own pictures or pictures of your family from the past. Some of them I still cringe at. So we have to understand that we don't have all the answers right now. And maybe another way to look at it would be like when the World Wide Web came out, right? Because it's even funnier to say it that way than the internet. When the World Wide Web was born, of course, schools were concerned. We talked about that tension that existed at that time. If we looked at the guidance that came out or the supports, it'd be funny now because we have the benefit of hindsight. We can look back with what we know right now and say, oh, wow, that was short-sighted or whatever. But I tend to be a little bit more generous in my assessments, that they did the best they could with what they knew at the time, and we need to do the same thing. So at PDE, we're trying to help schools ask better questions before they're adopting tools. That's part of what we perceive our responsibility is right now, and we're guiding schools to answer questions like, who benefits from this technology? Who might be harmed by it? What student data is being collected, and who owns that data? Does the tool strengthen instruction, or is it simply a novelty? And does it expand opportunity for urban and rural and under-resourced schools, or just some of them? And perhaps importantly, does this technology strengthen human connection or weaken it? Because we understand at the department that good policy isn't just about compliance, it's also about a reflection of values. And we also know that no single document can solve AI permanently, but at the same time, we don't want educators to have to navigate this space alone. So PDE is working on moving beyond conversation and into some practical support. We have what we refer to as the SAS portal. It's pdesas.org. Our SAS portal. And on that portal, educators can, or they already have access to some AI information, digital literacy toolkits that are designed to provide them some support. We also already offer several courses that can be taken online or in a hybrid setting. These courses are for teachers for Act 48 or Act 45 credit. I know if you're a teacher and admin by when you nodded just now. And we're offering those courses, which again will probably be funny to me in 5 years, that's where we started. But we're offering those courses because we know that teachers and leaders, it's as much about their readiness for this moment as it is about the students' readiness, even though we spend a lot of time talking about the students' readiness. I think one of the most important things that the department is doing right now in this space is that we're listening. This is perhaps that humility piece. We refer to it in the department as the AI Roadshow. And right now we are working with researchers and some educators, and they are going to between 6 to 8 different locations across the state, and they're asking different school systems in that region, so multiple schools in a region, they're asking them about what they're doing with AI, what they need help with at this point, what questions still remain, what supports they're seeking. And we also are doing one that's fully online. So if this is the first time that you're hearing about it, we can provide to the executive director some of that information, and perhaps she could share it. If I knew exactly where it was on our website, I would say right now, but I don't. So perhaps you'd like to listen into that one. Now, the point of the AI Roadshow is to make sure that we're listening and gathering information from the people who are doing the work so that our work actually reflects their need. I think that's going to be particularly important. We recognize that good policy doesn't happen in isolation, especially in education. And that educator expertise that we're seeking is something that I think we have to be sure that we're protecting. There's sometimes this narrative that AI is going to replace teachers. And I want people to know that I fundamentally and categorically reject that idea, if you hadn't guessed by this point. In fact, I actually think that the rise of AI actually makes educators more important, because now students need help evaluating all of the information they're seeing. Frankly, as an adult, I do too with some of the things that I see, deciding what's real and what's not. Is there really a ship with 147 people on it circling out in the ocean that has some type of communicable disease, right? I don't know if you have, I'm seeing some blank stares, so maybe this is just in my algorithm, right? All right, maybe so. This is that moment of regret where I wish I hadn't gone off on this tangent, right? But it underscores the point that maybe we all need a little help, and especially students who haven't lived as long as we have need some help identifying bias and assessing credibility and thinking critically in some new ways. Because we know that AI can produce some convincing misinformation in a matter of seconds. It hallucinates, it creates fake citations. Boy, I feel bad for some lawyers out there. Woo! It can reinforce biases because it's trained with bias. And so it's going to continue to perpetuate that bias. And AI produces polished answers, and given to any of us, or students in this case, that those polished answers don't necessarily connect with actual understanding. So I think this means that the role of educators is more essential than ever, but it's changing to something that we always known it should be. That educators shouldn't be the people who are just giving answers, or not answers, giving information to students and saying, this is what you should know, write it in your notebook, now regurgitate it on a test. They should be the guides and the mentors, the facilitators of discernment. That's actually always been at the heart of good teaching. So perhaps it's pushing us to do what we've always known was the right thing. And so I've traveled around quite a bit and talked to different teachers, and I recently talked to a middle school teacher. As a former middle school teacher and a former middle school principal, I have a special place in my heart for middle schoolers. It's an age when only their mother can love them most of the time. But I just have that special place in my heart for them. And so I was talking to this middle school teacher about her experience, and she said that she redesigned one of her assignments after discovering that students were experimenting with generative AI. Instead of banning the technology outright, the teacher asked the students to compare their essay to the one that was generated by the AI. And then they had an in-class discussion about which felt more authentic and which demonstrated deeper thinking and which reflected a better lived experience. That's some pretty sophisticated teaching. I really like where she was going with that. And it points to a larger shift that I think we have to embrace, and that's If a student can generate a 5-paragraph essay in 30 seconds or less, then perhaps the question isn't how do we catch them cheating? Perhaps the better question is what kind of learning remains undeniably human? There's actually some answers to this, right? Discussion, collaboration, presentation, reflection, problem solving, creativity, hands-on learning, all of that undeniably human. And in an AI era, we might again finally be pushed to redesign not only our assignments, but also our assessments in ways that we've known was right all along, just like what teachers should be doing as the mentors and the facilitators and the guides, not the sage on the stage, but the guide on the side, right? Again, I know who the teachers are by who nodded at that, right? We've heard that for a long time. This finally might push us to do that and do it now. We also have to acknowledge a difficult reality, and that is if we're not intentional, particularly at the state level, that AI could deepen inequities. There are some schools that have robust infrastructure and professional development opportunities, and they can move quickly, and then others struggle with bandwidth and staffing and procurement expertise and cybersecurity capacity. And we, again, already know that opportunity for students shouldn't depend on their zip code. So again, this might push us to rethink deployment of AI and rethink advice and rethink the way that we're funding so that we make sure that we have equitable access and also sustainable implementation. Brings me to another area where policy, I think, matters pretty deeply, and that's the area of privacy and trust. Parents deserve reassurance that schools are protecting their child's information. AI systems collect an enormous amount of data. Typed responses, voice recordings, behavioral patterns, usage history. And again, that's why Pennsylvania's emerging guidance emphasizes transparency, data governance, and careful procurement processes. Because not every tool is truly free. Sometimes the product being developed is the data itself. And that thought that I inserted there actually comes from television back in the day when it was coming out. The thought was, if it's free, then perhaps you are the commodity. If the commodity is free, you are the commodity. And so in this case, if the technology, if the AI is free, that is, if you're not paying for the most robust version that has the data privacy, that allows you to be the owner of the data as the school, then perhaps it is the students who are the commodity. It is their data that they're after. So districts have to ask difficult questions. Where's the data stored? Is it being used to train other models? Can it be deleted? Who has access? What protections exist? And that work doesn't sound very exciting, but it is absolutely foundational because public trust matters, and once it's lost, it is really difficult to rebuild. And I think that is part of the reason why we are moving perhaps too slowly, but at least we're moving slowly and not being reckless in the guidance that we put out. And another thing that personally concerns me is that AI has become more conversational and emotionally responsive. And because of that, we have to be careful not to confuse simulation with connection. Students don't merely need answers, they need encouragement, they need accountability, they need belonging, they need trust. And an AI system may simulate empathy, but that simulation isn't a relationship. And schools have to remain places where students can experience genuine human connection and authentic mentorship and real care. And again, that's why Pennsylvania's approach emphasizes human-centered AI, or human-in-the-loop AI is another way you might hear that. The goal for us isn't to remove the innovation from the classroom. The goal is to ensure innovation strengthens what makes education fundamentally human. And despite all of the challenges that I laid out, I'm actually pretty optimistic. Not because AI is automatically good or fundamentally good, I don't think that, but because educators are really approaching it thoughtfully and with integrity. Across Pennsylvania, I see teachers that are experimenting carefully, the administrators who are asking good questions. I see intermediate units that are supporting districts collaboratively, and that tells me that the future of AI in education won't be determined by suits in Silicon Valley, or at least not there alone. It'll be shaped in classrooms and in board meetings and in professional learning communities and in conversations like this one. And ultimately, it'll be shaped by the values that educators choose to uphold. So let's think back to that student who's sitting at the kitchen table at 10:30 at night because they're a middle school student, waited till the last minute to do their homework, right? They're staring at the screen, that blinking cursor, and they're asking artificial intelligence for help. The real question isn't whether that student will grow up in a world that's shaped by AI, because they will. I hope I've convinced you of that. The real question is, will they grow up also with the ability to think critically and act ethically and build relationships and discern truth and show empathy and contribute meaningfully to their communities? If education gets this moment right, AI won't diminish humanity, because educators have always done what matters most. They've helped young people become fully human in a changing world. Thanks for having me today.
I will now invite my panelists up to take a seat for our panel discussion. And thank you again to Secretary Rowe for being here. While we're all getting settled, I wanted to share a story with you all about meeting with my panelists. So as you can imagine, trying to get a time where all of us can meet when I'm working with educators was very difficult, but we did it. And I had 3 questions for them going into this conversation. 4, actually. I had to figure out how to pronounce Ashley's last name. It's Bottiglieri. We'll get there. But I was asking them, what is your unique contribution to this conversation? What do you want to make sure that we definitely talk about? And what is something that you don't want to be asked about? And I have to say the first 2 questions were full of thoughts and ideas, and the last question was very sparse. And so I'm very thankful to have all of these educators, people who are thinking about your children's education, your grandchildren's education in such a thoughtful way. I left that conversation feeling incredibly hopeful, and that is my intention of how you will feel today after this conversation as well. So we will go until 7:15. At 7:15, I'll transfer over and answer some of your questions. I imagine there are way more questions than we have time for, but I'm just thankful to all of our panelists for spending this time with us. So I want to share who's here with us and sort of what they said to me about what their unique contribution is to this conversation. And this was not planned, but Dr. Phil Gale is right next to me. He's the first one here. He brings a system lens to this conversation. He's thinking about how schools actually implement artificial intelligence and what guidance leaders can give as a superintendent. Tony is in classrooms daily helping teachers design AI use that enhances student thinking. Ashley is bridging her classroom experience with policy background, focusing on privacy, data, and what guardrails schools need in place. Ollie, down at the end, prepares future educators and brings a thoughtful, sometimes skeptical lens on AI and learning. So he's not only in the higher education space, he's also teaching future educators on how to understand AI tools. Brian works across districts, focusing on equity, scale, and instructional shifts, and was formerly a social studies teacher as well. And Keith supports regional coordination, including AI efforts across districts. So I thank you all for being here. And as I've reiterated many times, I invite you all to engage with each other's responses. What I'm my strongest intention is that we have an important conversation that people feel sparks curiosity for them. So I will just start with what's changing. And this question is sort of for you, Tony, but if other people have thoughts, please feel free to chime in. When you think about this school year compared to even a year ago, what's actually different in how teaching and learning are happening because of AI?
So, and thanks for having me. Thanks for inviting me here. I think one of the themes that we're going to hear is how fast things are changing, and every year there's something different. Feels like every month. For us this year, the big change was that our AI capabilities, our resources, were all now embedded right into our teachers and students' resources that they usually use. So you open up a Google Doc, it comes up with Gemini and says, "Hey," or you come up with your Gmail, it's like it comes up with that. If you come up with in your Sheets document, do you want me to sort these cells? All those kind of things. It's kind of like when you'd fire up your Gateway 2000 and Microsoft Word, and there'd be the paperclip, and you'd be like, "Hey, I think you're trying to write a resume." And you'd say, "Okay." Except now, Clippy has read every book that's ever been published, and he wants to micromanage the whole thought process. So, I mean, it's totally different like that. Now, I think in our district, we've kind of got past the freak out mode and kind of past the novelty of it, and we're trying to dive down into not how can we stop kids from cheating, to how can we actually use AI to make learning experiences better, not just like faster to make or easier, but better for our students. And I think that's something that we've worked hard at Penn Manor, and that we've done a really good job with coming up with those things, which hopefully I'll get to share with you a couple of those. Yeah.
I'm curious if you want to walk through a specific assignment or activity just to give us an example of something that looks different now.
Yeah, so I'm a K through 12 learning facilitator, so I work with teachers of all grade levels in our district, coming up with activities, helping them with this kind of stuff, like technology things as well. So I'll just kind of give you one from each level. In a second grade classroom, a lot of times in second grade you have a really wide range of ability levels in there. So one second grade teacher came to me and asked, she really wanted to challenge her high achieving second grade students, and did I have some ideas? So we made a bot for them to use, these second graders, that when they would fire it up, it would give them a chance to go through a choose your own adventure type story where they could say, where do you want to go? And it could be, Russia, it could be the moon, it could be whatever. And then it would go through and it would give them their choice where they wanted to go at each step of the way, but it would do it at like a third and fourth grade reading level, and then ask them those analysis questions along the way so they could feel like they were really understanding what was happening and hit some of that vocab, maybe that the higher level vocab that we could give to those second graders. The same classroom in the math side of things, Gemini has a feature where you can actually create games, like HTML games. So we had our students create math games where they go in and say, I want it to review addition, and I want it to be a soccer person. Every time that you get one right, the soccer guy moves across the field. And every time you get one wrong, it says, oh no, and you move backwards. So these are second graders doing this, and then sharing with each other, and using it to test each other on their math skills. Like, that kind of stuff is really fun for them and really engaging. Middle school example. We have the middle school teacher, 7th grade, that goes through and does a mythology unit, Greek mythology, and typically they're all assigned a different Greek god, and they read a little excerpt, and then they do an assignment, whether it's a project or some presentation. But him and I sat down and we made a bot that took on the persona of all the different gods. So then if they were researching a god, they would go and they would interview it like they were doing a podcast and ask it questions. So that's a totally different level of engagement. From reading, when you're sitting in a 7th grade classroom, you see somebody go, hey, I just asked Poseidon about Odysseus. He's so angry. It's like, that's huge for 7th graders, to get them involved and thinking that way. And then the last one that I get a lot with my upper level, like seniors and writing and things, that's my language arts teacher. They're teaching seniors, so they're like, they can't use this, which is understandable because they do research papers and things. But we created something that would basically find holes in the student's argument. So they put their thesis in there and it'd say, well, what's your backing for this? Or have you thought of that? Or, well, this research says that. What do you think about this? And has them rethink and re-research all the important parts of their thesis so that's ready to go when they go to that final draft. So that's a lot. I'm kind of rambling there, but those are some of the ways that we're doing it at all these different levels.
That's awesome. Thank you. I want to ask you as a follow-up, Brian, when we've spoken, you have such a focus on equity, and I can tell that's really important to you. What does this look like across districts with this implementation? Are there any patterns emerging or any gaps that you're seeing?
Yeah, so Keith and I work together at the IU, where we support all 22 school districts throughout Lancaster and Lebanon County. And part of our initiative is bringing people together and having these conversations of what does AI look like across the board, and how can we learn from each other in these areas. And through those conversations, I think we're seeing a lot of the diffusion of innovation. You have some very early adopters, ones who are ready, let's make these bots, let's do these with schools, and let's do these with students. And as we're slowly seeing, more people are getting curious, but we also have people who are not leaning into it yet. And we at the IU, we want to find ways to respect all opinions and all values and work towards building this idea of AI competency and AI literacy, because like as Dr. Rowe said, that is what the students will be going into. And so I look at the use of AI for efficiency of teachers, and we're seeing across our region such a shift in demographics. A rise in multilingual learners, a rise in low socioeconomic learners, a rise in neurodivergent learners, and a lot of times coming from a middle school, I had all of them in one classroom, and I needed to differentiate and support them the best that I could. With AI, I'm able to find ways that can meet them where they're at and push them forward. So I use, for example, I taught the American Revolution, and when we look at Common Sense by Thomas Paine, that could be a very high-level text for a multilingual learner. I can put that text or the reading that I want them to do into AI and ask it to pull out best scaffolding techniques so my students with limited English proficiency can still have access to the content. On the flip side, I may have high-level gifted or advanced learners who I need to challenge them and push them further. I can ask it for, were there people against Thomas Paine? How can I find a response to it, and how can I challenge them as gifted learners to see another side of the argument? Now, I'm only one person trying to figure all this out, and this use of AI helps with that efficiency so I can meet all learners where they are and push all learners together. And so that's what we're seeing our approach is how can we do that to promote that so all learners have access to the strong education that teachers want to provide.
Thanks, Brian. And I'll follow up with my self-proclaimed systems thinkers, Dr. Gale and Dr. Bottiglieri. Are systems keeping up with this pace, especially for schools that are, early adapting and using AI in this way?
I would say, to piggyback off of Brian, we are, as districts, so supportive of our IU13 because so many times we feel like a silo, like we're doing things on our own. And it's so important to have organizations like this bring all districts together in Lancaster and Lebanon County so we can say, oh my gosh, Penn Manor is doing this, and Pequea Valley is doing this, and Cocalico is doing this, and we're all in like a safe space to be able to share and learn from each other. And also, if I can piggyback off of a comment that Dr. Rowe made earlier about a spectrum, I think you see that across the IU. There are so many of us that are on this huge scale and are all over the place. Even personally and in our professional use of AI, I'm very much, let's do it. We're moving. We're not going to be able to avoid this, but I'm not somebody who's quite ready to upload my medical records into ChatGPT yet, right? So it's okay to be a kind of, I'm okay with it for this, but I'm not quite okay with it with this aspect right now. And we face that, I think, systems-wise on the daily because, most of you sitting out here are dealing with it on a personal level, maybe with your own child or just in your personal life, where we're responsible for the data of your children, and you're under 13. So it's a very different world when we're talking about the tools that those under 13 users are going to have access to versus what maybe our secondary learners have access to. And being able to balance that is difficult every day.
Well, I would start with thank you to Dr. Rowe because what she just talked about really affirmed what we were doing. And I think that was very encouraging to me that actually I might have a good idea or might have a sense of what we need to be doing, especially in this very complex world. And I think for us, we've been talking about AI for a number of years, back even before I think we even started with AI, when we were referring to it as artificial intelligence, and we said the whole word. But I think in that part, the trepidation came because unlike many other issues that we deal with in education or in life, we see the end, or we have a good idea of where the end may be. But in this case, the end is not even existence, but it's changing every day. It's changing so rapidly. So for us, it's how do we have policies in place that do protect our students, protect our teachers? How do we guide our teachers? How do we guide our students? 2 years ago, we tried to wrangle the wild, wild west of AI, and we upset some people because we said we're only going to support one platform. And we want all teachers, all students to only use, I won't advertise for them because they're big enough, they make enough money, but we only wanted to use that one platform. And what that has allowed us to do then is to make sure that our policies, our practices, and our support are all aligned so that it's not one teacher versus one teacher versus one teacher. And I think those are the types of things that have been very helpful for us to make sure that we, in school systems where we do move very slowly, we look at it a year at a time. Best maybe halfway through the year, if we have a professional learning day, that we can make some changes. But we also realize that the platforms that we're working in, the ideas that we're working in, they can change very quickly. And almost as fast as some of us would change the color of our pen or whatever it would be. It's just extremely fast.
Can I say something there too?
Yeah.
Just to follow up on, from my perspective, working with teachers, the decision from our leadership to pick one platform and say that's what we're going with has made my job a lot easier. Because you'd have people that would email me all the time, like, hey, can I use this? Can I do that? Can I log into this with my school email? It's like, hey, dude, I don't even know what that is. So having something that we have this common language, we have a certain thing that we use, somebody like me who helps them with it gets really, really good at it, and I can help them instead of trying to understand 95 different things out there. So that's been really, really helpful for us, and then creating professional learning opportunities. But also in our district at Penn Manor, it hasn't been like forced on teachers, like we're gonna expect you to do this, this, and this by tomorrow. We've given them time to like kind of put their toe in and feel good about it before we moved on, but always had the supports there for them. The structure's there. So if they wanted to dig deep, I'm ready to go. Email me, let's do it. But if they need a little more time, we have that for them as well. So that's been a decision by our leadership that's really paid dividends with our teachers throughout the district.
I just want to jump in here for a second, because I think one of the things when we start talking about systems thinking, you know, the phrase guardrails and guidelines always come up, right? It's like, how do we create guidelines? And I think the guidelines of having one, you know, system, that's a great guideline, and creating guardrails to make sure that student information is protected and, you know, kept safe. But I think one of the things I appreciated about the Secretary's talk was that she like exposed a lot of the tensions and trade-offs that we have to consider too. Like there are so many tensions in terms of like technology versus human connection, right? And that is like prevailing across all the conversations we're having with AI. It's like, how do we privilege some of that human stuff? And I think that's what you know, you're talking about, Brian, with you know, like when you differentiate, it's like really meeting the human where they are, right? And there's tensions there, but there's trade-offs too. But I think more than anything, it's giving us, and this is what it's dawning on me over and over again as I think about this stuff. Technology is causing us to consider what our values are, what our values about learning are. And some of this got jump-started with the pandemic, right? The pandemic was like, okay, what do we value about learning? And we realized that there's a lot of human stuff that we value there. And this is just like causing that to just get ramped up even more, right? We're like really considering what it means to learn and what it means to be assessed learning and what it means to teach. And all those conversations are long overdue, and AI is just causing us to jumpstart some of that, which is really cool.
And I would just piggyback off of that. I think one of the questions that oftentimes, or issues or concerns that is raised is, will AI replace a teacher, an educator? And I wholeheartedly agree. It won't replace the teacher because that's the human part, and that's the relationship part. Now, someone who knows how to use AI well might replace somebody who doesn't, but that's part of our tools and the equipping of staff and teachers and even students along the way. But an important part for us has always been that the human, the teacher, the student, the administrator, is and must always be the final decision maker. And we've made sure that we've put stopgaps in place so that there are certain places where AI is not part of what we are doing. And I think that's part of the process that we have to make sure to protect, but also to really encourage people. I mean, we're all kind of skeptical. We can be a little cynical. We can be looking over our shoulder to see if someone's coming. And in this case, we want to ensure our teachers and our administrators and our students that this is a tool. Now, it's a tool that's very unique because I don't think we debated the ethical issues that came with a calculator, but this one is not only a tool, but it's also, there are the ethical sides of the whole discussion that needs to happen.
Yeah. So just to kind of bring kind of what everybody's been talking about here, a little bit with Ollie about the human connection, with Brian with the equity, Tony about the classrooms, and the human piece as well. I was working with a middle school teacher, and she was talking about students that are really struggling with long division, like writing all the steps out and all those things. And I said, this is where that connection comes into place. And you talk about what is something you really connect with. And the students were like, we love Minecraft. And I was like, this is where AI comes in as a purposeful tool. Let's have AI describe long division in terms of Minecraft. So we went through and did this and went through, and the kids were like, this makes sense. My daughter's 11. I took it home to her, and she's like, bro. And I was like, okay, because I'm not mom and dad. We're bro now. And she's like, I understand, this makes so much sense if the creeper's doing this and mining and combining. And I was like, I have no idea what you're talking about, but I understand long division. So, but it's just really interesting that we can make those connections to those students that really struggle with certain concepts to really dig into what they know and what they like and put it in those terms.
Ollie, one of the things that you just said made me think of this. When we were all talking, something you said that was important for you to talk about was AI companions. So I wanted to ask you, kind of, what are some of your concerns about AI companions?
I think the question you asked was, what are you the most afraid of? And I think that's the answer to me is AI companions. And I think the secretary talked a little bit about this, is like there are these chatbots that students can use that can be their friend or become their friend. And I've been in public education for 34 years. I guess I'm the old guy up here. It's okay. I get a Sunday newspaper. All right. I still get a physical Sunday newspaper, and that's part of the story. I get a physical Sunday newspaper. I was reading an article in the New York Times about AI companions, and in the article it said a certain number of students were using AI companions, and I stopped, put down the paper, and pulled out my phone and went to look at the digital copy because I wanted the source. Because it said 72% of adolescents in a study were using AI companions. And I figured that couldn't be accurate, right? So I had to find the original source, which I shared with all of you when we met last week. And so it was from Common Sense Media. They surveyed 1,000 adolescents. 72% reported using it at least once. 50%, over 50% report using it regularly. And that's concerning to me because this is the place where they're going for human connection. They're going there. And the things we know about AI, and specifically the chatbots, is they're sycophantic, right? They're really eager to please you. And it's just like Clippy, right? It's like, hey, it's like your best friend. That's a great idea, right? Oh yeah, you should do that. And think about having that power for an adolescent who's not going to challenge their ideas. It's not going to say, hey, you might be wrong here. This isn't a good idea, It's saying, yeah, that's a good idea. You should go do that. And I think that's really concerning. I think, when, maybe a decade ago, 15 years ago, we didn't have enough conversations about social media and the concerns around social media. And I think that we're at this pivot point right now where AI companions, if we don't have some hard conversations with our kids, with our parents around this stuff, that this is going to be the mental health thing that we're talking about in 5 years or 2 years. And we're already seeing some of this in the media in that, kids are saying, should I, harm myself? And if that sycophantic AI is like, yeah, hey, that's a great idea, I worry about the outcomes, and things have already happened to that degree. And so that's where my fears lay, because I recognize how the technology works and the fact that it's like, it is basing its decisions and its outputs based on predictions. And so the predictions are looking at the data set and saying, okay, what are most adolescents going to the internet to search for? And it's predicting based on that data set. And so kids are like struggling with their identity, struggling with, making good decisions, and it's spitting that stuff back to them. And that's like that's like the minefield that I'm the most worried about. It's just like how are we preparing our parents, how are we preparing teachers and our students to work in and live in that space?
And like talking about that, some of the work that we have colleagues at the IU doing are working on this idea of digital citizenship and connecting with families and schools. And how can we become partners in this? If we're seeing this as becoming such a big issue, there needs to be conversations about what does digital citizenship and a healthy relationship to AI look like? And how do we work together in achieving that? And it's through those conversations and having those conversations, starting in the classroom when a teacher is introducing AI, what is the best way to support this? But then helping parents understand that too, because parents have a lot going on right now, and we can provide those opportunities so everyone can attempt and approach these together. And I think that is a way that we are seeing us moving towards. It's this partnership between home and between schools around this idea of digital citizenship and digital literacy.
I did a program for a bunch of middle school students at a local school district, and I asked that question: how many of you are using? How many of you have an AI friend? And a third of them raised their hands. And they were comfortable enough to share that in their space, and they were like, and I was shocked by that. And absolutely, the digital citizenship needs to go across grade levels. It needs to be taught at appropriate levels, and parents need to know about this too. And I think that's where, I know that adds one more thing to school districts or another thing to IUs, but it's important work that needs to happen. And to us at Millersville, we have to work in that space too, and we are. And trying to build that capacity, build that understanding to really navigate these emergent, evolving spaces. Yeah, it's a difficult road to hoe.
It's interesting that you say that, just because it makes me think of it's a very psychologically natural thing for children to have an imaginary friend. But what's the difference then when it's an AI companion? It's actually someone who they don't have that imaginary conversation with them. It's a real one. And that's a very different situation. Go ahead, Ashley.
I was just going to echo you, Ollie, actually. The Harvard Review did a study of the top use of AI, 2024, 2025, 2026, and you see therapy and companionship creep from number 7 to number 5 to now being the number 1 use for AI tools in our culture right now. And you also mentioned, we don't want to put one more thing on schools with teaching kids and families how to use these tools, but it's also really important to us. Because in my seat, yes, I can control what happens on my network, on our district devices, but I also am not blind to the fact that kids are going home and they're using their own personal devices. So I can block these things all day, but they're still going to go home and use them. So the partnership between schools, teachers, educators, families, parents is so important, because if we are following a philosophy of, I only want to open this platform, or we're going to endorse these tools, they have access to everything, these companion bots, these negative Nancy kind of AI tools at home. Another tool that we use at Pequea Valley that we just signed up for securely is our filter. We run all of our internet filtering through them. They've come up with their own AI chat, which I just learned about recently, which is really cool. It follows a ChatGPT type language, but it's also monitored through their Aware tool. So right now, student Gmail, student Google Drive, student tools that are being used are flagged for inappropriate content. So if a student searches for how should I commit suicide, or I'm being abused at home, or things like that, we get an automatic flag about that. That now is also happening in their AI chat tool. So if they are having an inappropriate conversation, or even taking that to a much lower grade of using it for cheating and to get answers, we have access to that logged information, and it also redirects them. So if they're attempting to go to a ChatGPT or a Claude or something like that, it's redirecting them to this one that we can say, hey, this is your safe space. We want you to use this tool while you're at school. which I think is really cool. So, the systems, the industries are trying to give us tools to help support.
Well, something I really got when you shared that prior, Ashley, was that it's really important that not only are schools understanding how to adapt to these resources, but that there's a good relationship between schools and parents so that is happening. Can you talk a little bit more about that, or maybe some challenges there?
Sure. I think it's difficult. I know when you all get your beginning of the school year packet of information, you're not looking at every piece of paper that comes home. You're not reading every email. We know this. But we still want to try to share as much of what is happening in our classrooms and in our buildings. And our best bet right now is teaching teachers best use. Somebody mentioned earlier about getting a phone call. Can I use this in my classroom? We know that's how this works. So teachers hang out with teacher friends on the weekend and they come to school on Monday and they're like, hey, I learned about this new thing. We're going to use it. And we find out about it 3 days later and they're like, whoa, terms of service is 18 and we shouldn't be using that. And what are they doing with data? But that's important to relay to our parents. And unfortunately, it's a little bit of a dry subject, right? Who wants to really sit and read a terms of service document or a privacy policy? But AI can help you do that. So if you copy and paste the terms of service and ask it, can my 13-year-old child use this? That's a great way to have an immediate answer of, you know what, I think we're going to wait. Or yeah, let's look at this together, maybe.
Thank you. I want to ask one final targeted question, then maybe a larger question before we shift to audience. This is for you, Dr. Gale. I'm just curious if you can speak a little bit to how AI is currently being used for operational efficiency in schools, and maybe how you might want to use it in the future.
So I think that's what really intrigued me and got me excited about the possibilities of AI coming into the system. You hear all the time, and it's 100% true, we never have enough time in the day. We have a lot of managerial tasks that we have to do. And the more we can help teachers, more we can help administrators remove those, that means that there's more time with students. And we go back to what Dr. Rowe was talking about. The key to education is the relationship that exists between the teacher and the student and the students and the students. So some of those things that used to take hours upon hours, I always said when I was in the classroom, if I had had a secretary, I'd have been teacher of the year. Now, I really wouldn't have been because I wasn't that good. But at the same time, it sure would have been helpful, and Dr. Hudax can agree to that because he was my principal and he just put up with me. Don't share any secrets, Marty, please don't. But, some of those things are repetitive, administrative tasks that we need a friend to do. And that's where AI can help. And that's where then that frees us or allows us to then go into the higher level thinking and the higher level activities. And I think that's the same for our students as well. Some of the things that we spend so much time having students do can now be accelerated so that you can go into another level of thinking, another level of activity, and having students more engaged in different things. The examples that these folks could give of what's happening in our classrooms today will only be leaps and bounds better as we continue to understand what is happening and as we become more comfortable. And I think that's one of our true challenges is how do we stay not just competent, but comfortable enough to utilize that. When you have 25, 30 kids staring at you, what do you mean you don't know how to use the technology? It's so simple. But some of us who are the immigrants into this world of technology, it's not simple for us. So how do we help? How do we take some of those administrative tasks that allows them? I think a good example is not just what happens in the classroom, but what happens with the teacher to prepare for the classroom. Tony has worked with our teachers in many ways to take data, test results, assessment results, boil that down and get even more information that we had before so that then the teachers can utilize that and create lessons, create activities that help students where they are. And then it then allows that student to make gains in ways that they wouldn't have been able to do before.
Thank you. Something that I keep thinking about, I think in all messaging and any conversation about AI is bringing in humanity. And I want to also ask about collaboration. You all are a very collaborative group, and I understand that you kind of share your learnings across where you are. Can you share a little bit more about that if anyone has a story, or kind of what maybe what your goal looks like for how to share this learning with other people?
I'll be glad to start, because I think in the same vein as the Hourglass Foundation, the public school system that we have, and it even creeps into the private school, in Lancaster County and then stretching it to Lancaster and Lebanon counties through the IU. The folks, Matt Stem and his team at the IU, provide all of us with so many different mechanisms to collaborate. Whether it's as superintendents, we meet twice a month, and you can imagine that group. All the way down to teachers by subject area that they are working and collaborating with. And I think that's the important part. No one's going to have all the answers, but the more we share, the more we discuss, that accelerates everyone's learning and as well as the usage. So I think we are very fortunate in this area. We compete on the athletic fields, but not in the academic field. And I think we truly see that across the many different aspects of that, and very appreciative of the work that the IU has done to help us learn. Because realistically, if you know one school district in Pennsylvania, you know one school district. There's very unique differences between all of us, even here in Lancaster County. But yet at the same time, we all have that common goal. We want our students to do well. And the more we talk about the things that are working, the better off it is. I'm sure Brian and you guys can speak a little bit more about those efforts that do happen.
Yeah, I was going to brag about Ashley for a minute.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. No, so part of our work, like, it's great that we have wonderful districts that come together, and it makes Keith and our job easier because the districts want to work together and they're free and sharing information to promote better learning for everyone. So we look at Pequea Valley as one of the leaders in how do you create a policy to support teachers using it. So they've developed this wonderful stoplight model for teachers to use. And so anytime Keith and I are working with districts, we're always saying, hey, look at what Pequea Valley has done. And look at this, and here's their contact. And they have been so appreciative to say, okay, someone else is doing it, I'm gonna reach out to it. And we're able to bring people together to collaborate on these things. And it's all because of the work that you're doing with your district to get others started and moving in this direction.
I was actually going to kind of brag on her too. So, hey, she's going to get two here.
I didn't pay them, I swear.
But last year, one of the things that we did as an IU is we put together, we called an AI task force, and we invited all of our districts to be able to participate. They could send administrators, teachers, anybody within the district they wanted to be part of it. And then we brought in some different outside people to talk to them about policy, and that's when, Pequea Valley shared about what they're doing for their classroom guidance, and they just shared that, shared all these things freely with all of our districts, and that's what really allowed them to talk, is to just have that open forum for all of them to do it. We had some in person, we did some virtually, just so that we were sure that we could get all of the stakeholders involved in what's happening across the different districts.
Yeah, just to build on that a little bit, Millersville, our work in this space is really with pre-service teachers and in-service teachers and school leaders. And so a fair number of our pre-service teachers go off and work in Lancaster County. And so really understanding what local school districts need and what they're doing is critical to that work. But so many of them also go out beyond Lancaster County. And so there's collaborations that we have that are broader than that are like with the Pennsylvania State School Boards Association, working with them to see what their work is doing, working nationally with ISTE. So we really are trying to understand what our students need, not just to work in Lancaster County, but like you said, there's, knowing one school district is one school district. And while our work is so centered here in Lancaster, some of our students go off to Philadelphia, and some of them go back to Pittsburgh, and some of them leave our state. And so recognizing what's happening broader is really critical too. And so working in that space is some of the work that we're doing at Millersville.
Thank you. As promised, we will transition now to questions from the audience. We don't have a ton of time, so if you have a specific question for someone specifically, please clarify. I'll come around with the microphone if anyone has a question. Don't all jump at once.
I work in higher ed, so I'm excited to hear about all the initiatives that K through 12 are bringing. I am wondering, what are you doing about the environmental impact? How are you addressing that?
So I'll talk a little bit about that. So we have a long time, right? So we could be here for a while for this one. No, I think that's
That was
one
one of the questions that we didn't want to answer.
I think that's an interesting
It really
one.
was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's an interesting one because when we look at outside of education, right? So AI is not just education. It's not just small business. It's not just large business. It's global. It's global. I mean, ChatGPT had 1 million users in 2 days, right? That's amazing that happened. But as we're looking at, what's the environmental impact, right? It takes water to cool down all these servers that are putting data centers everywhere. When you do a text query on Chat, Gemini, Claude, whatever you're using, like that's equivalent to like a droplet of water that's being used, right? You generate an image, that's equivalent to using a bottle of water. You generate video, short video, you're talking a gallon of water that's being used during that time. So that's not talked about really much outside of education, that's where we're trying to educate both our teachers and our students that we're working with that, it's know better, do better, right? So it's really cool to make yourself an action figure or a bobblehead or a Funko Pop on AI and post that. But you have to look at what's the environmental impact of doing those fun things and what's that causing. So I think we're starting to educate that part because we need to educate as they're moving into the work field, knowing that what they're doing is having a bigger impact than just what they're creating using this tool.
Yeah, I think education is probably the most critical part of that, and it's integrated in all of the conversations I have with my students around AI. Is to be really conscious of the environmental impacts of the work that they do. I mean, it's great to make this all these cool videos and this slop that we pull, but there's an environmental cost that comes with that. And so giving them tools, like these are some of the tools I shared with these guys, which uses more, which you can go on and see if I do this versus this, which uses more electricity, which uses more water. There's a site called Your Digital Life that you can go on and look to and track just kind of keep track of what you've done over a course of a week and see, okay, I've watched this many videos on Instagram, I've done this many things. What is the toll on the electricity and the water usage? And having a better understanding of what those things are will help you make better decisions. I know that certainly seeing some of those tools has helped me say, okay, I'm only gonna use AI for when I really wanna do important work. If it's just to fool around and make a poem about my dog, that might be something else to do, right? That's something we don't want to waste the electricity and the water for, right?
So I own a language agency, and we provide interpreting and translating for schools. So I'm just wondering, when you talk about the policies, it's definitely challenging. What are the policies? Are you coming up with policies of when AI can be used and when human translators are required? And when you think about the consideration for compliance for Title VI, and whether or not families are really understanding and trusting AI, especially when there's hallucinations with certain languages, and when you have languages like Swahili, Arabic, French, Spanish that are spoken across a variety of countries. So I'm just wondering where policies and use of AI comes into play to ensure compliance and trust and real communication.
So I can answer that from Penn Manor's perspective. We have not. We still continue to provide interpreters for our families that do not speak English as their first language. Because for us, that's that human connection side of education. I think it's important that we have someone there that is not only helping them understand, but they're seeing that person as a support as well. So for us, we have not gone down that road. Now, the challenge is sometimes an interpreter may not be available for a family, or that language that we may not be able to find somebody for, but thankfully in Lancaster County, that opportunity has expanded greatly.
For Pequea Valley, I can share that we just recently adopted a board-approved policy for artificial intelligence. It doesn't specifically touch on translation, but the moral of the story of that board policy is that it ends with a human-made decision. So I would echo Phil in saying, we're not using AI specifically for those interpreting purposes. There are times where we may use it because we're under a time constraint to send out a letter, or we're sending a weather call in the morning and I need to translate the text into an appropriate language. Those tools, I think, for me personally, are where it comes in handy, but I don't think a human interpreter can be replaced for us right now by artificial intelligence. There are so many other places that we would like to use that efficiency and take advantage of it. Our policy specifically touches on human resources and hiring policies and making sure that we're the final decision maker. A human is the final. It's not just uploading a resume and saying, oh, out of these 5, this is the best candidate. Well, have we interviewed that person? Have you talked to that person? What does that look like? Same thing with grading. I may be able to upload my student's essay, but it gives me all these holes, and I'm the final one that says, I've had this kid in class for 8 months, and I've never seen her write like this before. This doesn't make sense. So using that human experience to guide, I hope that's helpful.
We have time for probably one more question. Okay.
Thank you all for coming. Very informative. Appreciate your time and all your good work. So where are we globally in education with AI? How are we ranking? Because it is a global world, and me being in the business world, we have to compete and we have to bring out, the best in our students. So I'm just curious with AI and compared to other countries, how are we doing?
So I guess the question is, are you talking about the integration into classrooms or use or policy? Because I think that depending on what your question is asking, it will give different answers. I know that European countries are way ahead of us in terms of writing policies and setting guidelines around AI literacy. That is, we're like, some of the resources I use with my students are from like 2022. And those are things that we're still waiting to see at a national level here. In fact, as the administration changed nationally, almost all of the AI resources that were on the PDE website were pulled down. And so all of the things that all the founding documents that were helping to guide policy at the national level just disappeared. And so that was a huge setback for us. And I think that my concern with that is that we're letting some of the companies dictate for schools and for the nation how we should set policy, and that's a real concern. In terms of integration, I would think we're probably a little bit ahead. I know we have a big partnership with Sweden, and so that's a school system that we do a lot of work with. And so I recognize the types of things they're doing there. And they're one of those countries that are really advanced in terms of education. And they're coming here for our work with AI because in terms of, understanding what the tools can do, understanding how that can support educators. So from that standpoint, I would say, we're probably a little bit ahead because we're, having very, very innovative teachers and support systems working with teachers and doing that. And so, it really depends. From a privacy standpoint, the European Union leads in privacy laws. So their guidance it's actually, we benefit because of the privacy laws they have. Because in a lot of the tools that we're working with are international tools. And so they don't just have to meet our guidelines, but also meet international guidelines. And so we benefit a lot from that.
We could take one final question if there was one, but if not, that's okay.
I'm trying to think. One of the leaders in AI has said that for young people, you will be divided into 2 categories. You are either an expert in AI or you're not. And you don't want to be in the second category.
Do you have a question that you wanted to?
So it seems to me that the curriculum for the schools should be, how do you make your students really proficient in using all the AI tools? Because if they aren't proficient, they will be left behind when they get out of school.
I would spin that to a little bit, not only proficient in the use of the tools, but yet at the same time, the ability to think along with the tools. And I think that's the important part. I think that's truly what schools have been doing since the creation of schools, taking new tools, helping students to learn them. Now, sometimes that was books. I'll even throw out an older word than Ollie did with encyclopedias. You remember those? Yeah. So we all along that's been our challenge. Now the tools that we're mainly talking about today and focused on are technology related. So we all need to be able to, that's the emphasis with students, with even us as adults. How do we use these tools to be more impactful and in our world? I think that's the challenge, and it's not far off. Like, how do we best prepare students for when they leave high school to be able to do the things that they need to do? Liz, your question about the environmental question. I haven't focused on the environmental part, but I've focused on how do we help students get into fields so that then they can be part of that. And I think we see it in Lancaster, just like we saw with the demand with welders. Now we're looking at electricians, HVAC, all of those skilled trades that then can work in AI data centers or wherever it would be.
Did you have a comment? Okay. How about a round of applause for our panelists? With that, I thank you all so much for spending this evening with us, venturing into a topic that can elicit lots of different fears, excitement, et cetera, for people. Thank you all for demystifying the conversation a little bit. If you are new to Hourglass, I just wanted to encourage you to become a member of Hourglass. Outside of this event, we host monthly events here at the Ware Center. We call them First Friday Forums. They are always focused on a quality of life issue, and we'd love to have you there. Drink service is continuing as you're leaving, so thank you again for spending the evening with us, and hope to see you again.